Okay, hello everybody. Vov Tishrei has a very special meaning to me because, believe it or not, I don't know who's watching, I don't know your ages, but I want to tell you that I knew Rebbetzin Chana from when I was 4.5 years old. Now, it might sound very strange for me to tell you that, and the only reason is because when she came to America, my mother, Aleha Shalom, who was a very wonderfully loving person, she loved so many people. She realized that Reb Zachana has very few acquaintances in Crown Heights because even though there were some Lubavitcher families already that came out of Russia, mostly didn't even live in Crown Heights then. They lived further down in a neighborhood called Brownsville. And Crown Heights itself had very, very few Lubavitcher families. And my mother realized that Rebbe Sahana must be quite lonely during the day. She doesn't know the people. Crown Heights had all kinds of people, different Hasidic groups, different non-Hasidic, some modern Orthodox people. It was a very interesting community, a very affluent community, and people from all different stripes. And Rebbe Hana, though, was such a friendly woman that she used to stand outside of her apartment in the afternoons because the sun was always shining on that side of the street. And those of you who don't know where she lived, if you know where President and Kingston is, she lived in an apartment building on the corner of Kingston on President Street. And very interestingly, the sun always was shining in the afternoon on that side of Kingston Avenue. I think most of you notice that the sun shines on certain sides of the street, and when we have snow, one side of the street will be cleared of snow, and one side will still have a lot of snow because the sun never shines there and it takes a long time for the snow to melt. That side of President Street where she lived, the sun was always shining in the afternoon. And coming from Europe or Russia, they believed a lot in fresh air, although I don't know how fresh the air is in America. But the Rebbetzin would stand outside every day unless it was raining or unless it was very cold. And she would just stand there to get fresh air and enjoy the sun. And whoever passed by was able to stop and talk to her. And she would befriend them. And she was friendly to everybody. And everybody felt she was there like grandmother because she was just so giving and so loving. And whatever they spoke to her about, she inquired about their family, about their children, and she gave them advice. And everybody was able to approach her. My mother uh, would go to visit her on Shabbos afternoon, assuming that she's very lonely. And I, being an only daughter, I have two brothers, but I was an only girl. So my mother took me along because what should I do alone at home? So I used to go visit this lady who I had no clue who she was. I knew she was a very lovely lady, maybe like a grandmother to me or whatever. And they would talk about whatever they talked about. And I would sit there and she had certain candies prepared for me. And I listened to them talking, and I didn't even know why I'm here, but my mother came to visit this lady, so that's why I was here. So I grew up knowing Rebbe Chana ever since I was such a little girl. And anytime I would see her, of course, she knew me and she would say how I grew or how my hair looked so good. And she would always feel like I was like related to her, so because she saw me so often. So I had a very special connection to her, and Vav Tishrei means an awful lot to me on many, many fronts. Also, at the age of 14, I was zeicha. I had the honor, I was very lucky that a certain lady that used to bring Rebbe Chana to shul every Rosh Hashanah, she needed somebody to walk with her. The lady met me as I was going to shul myself, and she said, Esther, could you do me a favor? I really would like to daven, but I have to pick up Rebbe Chana at 11 o'clock to bring her to shul. Would you do me a favor and you pick her up instead of me because she knows you. She'll go with you. I would rather daven. Now, honestly, I'm embarrassed to tell you this. I really should have said, I also want to daven. But being a young girl, I felt it such a great honor to bring the Rebbe into shul. So I figured I'm going to daven to myself. Instead of davening with the whole million, I'll daven quickly and I'll be ready at 11 o'clock to bring Rebbe Tzachana to shul. And so at 11 o'clock, I presented myself at her door, and there was a little peephole. She looked through the peephole to see who was knocking on the door. She recognized me, so she right away opened up the door and she let me in. And she said to me, please sit in the dining room because I didn't get dressed yet. I don't get dressed unless I know that somebody's here to pick me up. So it'll take me a few minutes to get dressed. I sat down in the dining room And I noticed on the table, and this was every single year, there was a telegram on the table. And the telegram was open. I wasn't eavesdropping, but the telegram was open. And I read what it said. Now, those of you know what a telegram is. If you know what a fax is, it's very similar to a fax, comes differently. And a telegram would come to a person on the upper left hand side. It would say where it's coming from, either from any part of the world or any part of New York or America, whatever it was. The telegram read Liverpool, England, addressed to Mrs. Hannah Schneerson at her address on President Street. And then the following Hebrew words were written in English letters, and it said Shana Tova Umesuka, which means a good and sweet year. It was signed Label, a man called Label, the wife of Label, her name was Regina, and the granddaughter called Dahlia. Label was a son of Rebbetzin Chana, a brother of our Rebbe, but unfortunately in 1953 he had a sudden heart attack and he passed away. Our Rebbe did not want his mother to know that her son passed away because he was afraid that the pain would be too great and she wouldn't be able to withstand such a sorrow. So he kept it a secret, and he did a lot of things to keep it hidden from her. And throughout the rest of her life, it is assumed that she never found out that he passed away. But how did that happen? Because the Rebbetzin would have been wondering why she has no correspondence. So the Rebbe arranged, Rabbi Gronel of Hashalom told me, that the Rebbe asked him to go to the office of Western Union. That's a company that takes care of telegrams. He should go to their office and set up a telegram as if it's coming from England. And it went on like a ticker tape, or such a tape that they pasted onto the paper. And the message was what the Rebbe told him to write, Shana Tov Mesuka, and sign the brother's name Label as if he's alive. And Rabbi Groner would pay for the telegram, and he would take it and he would slide it under her door, because that's the way you used to get a telegram. They would slide it under your door. It didn't go by mail. Every year that I came, there was a new telegram on the table. The Rebbe did many things to keep it hidden from his mother. The Rebbe used to be in touch with the sister-in-law in England and ask what's going on at home. And then the Rebbe would write a letter to his mother. His handwriting was very similar to his brother Label. And he would write to his mother things about what's going on at home, which the Rebbe found out from the sister-in-law. He would send the letter to England, and the sister-in-law would mail it back from England so that the Rebbetzin would get it with the postmark that it came from England. During the week of Shiva, when the Rebbe wasn't really permitted to go visit her, because he used to visit her every single day. I left that out. Every single day in the evening at a certain hour, the Rebbe would visit his mother every single day. Rain or shine, the Rebbe visited his mother. But during Shiva, he asked Rabbanim what to do, and he was told that because it would be very detrimental to her health if she would worry about him not coming, he may go to her, but of course he can't sit down. So he could go and he should make himself busy looking for something in the bookcase or looking in a drawer, and he should tell her that she's busy. He's busy with something. He can't stay too long. But he was able to go every day for a few minutes, that she should not realize that something's going on. There was a problem, though, because when a person is sitting Shiva, you should never know about it, you're not allowed to wear shoes. You have to wear sneakers. And in those days, I can attest to the fact that they only made white sneakers. They didn't have what we have today, all colors and all different designs. They were white canvas sneakers. And if the Rebbe would be wearing white sneakers, the Rebbe would notice it because white is so noticeable. So somebody had to paint the sneakers black so it should look like shoes and it would not be very outstanding. During the time, the whole week of Shiva, the Rebbe wanted to say Kaddish for his brother, and he didn't want his mother to know. So he made a minyan in his Yechidus room. He invited 10 people and made up with them that they have to promise that they're not going to tell anyone about this minyan. They cannot tell their wives, they cannot tell their children. And Rabbi Chodakov, the Rebbe's first-hand secretary, and the Rebbe were together 10 people for a minyan. And this was a secret minyan 3 times a day during the whole week of Shiva, because the Rebbe did not want anyone to know about it, because Chalila Rebbetzin Chana would find out. So the Rebbe tried in every way to make the Rebbetzin happy and not let her worry and to ease her burden because she suffered so much. And I'm sure you've heard about the trials and tribulations that she had when her husband was in exile in Kazakhstan, so far away, away from people, away from Jews, away from teaching, away from learning. And she tried to make his life easier, Rebbetzin Chana, by going there. But the Rebbe knew that she suffered so much that the Rebbe tried to make her life here in America as beautiful and wonderful as possible. Those of us who knew the Rebbetzin, we honored her greatly. Very often she was invited to affairs. We would honor her at a luncheon that was made to raise money for Beis Rivka, or Neshei Chabad had a convention and she was a guest of honor at the convention. And she was a very wonderful woman, a very beautiful, regal woman, and we honored her greatly. But I want to share three personal stories. I think many of you have heard these stories. There are no new stories coming up. If you heard it, you'll hear it again. Those of you that are new, never heard it, I think you'll find it very interesting. One story I have to tell you happened when I was about 14 and a half or 15. I think it was 14 and a half. I have to tell you, girls, that in those days, girls or ladies, whoever's listening, and those of you might remember, if you're my age, that we didn't really have a shul for the ladies. And only Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, they gave us a room upstairs on the first floor of 770. But we didn't have a place where we could see the Rebbe. And we could never daven with the Rebbe. And during the week, during the whole year, we couldn't go to shul because there was no shul until the later years when the sukkah that was erected for sukkah stayed on a whole year. And the sukkah was used as a shul. We were able to sit in the back, like on a ledge, and we were able to see the Rebbe. But in the early years, we couldn't. So I would very often go to 770 to wait in front of 770 because when the Rebbe would finish davening, he would walk home to his home. And then I would be able to see his holy face because I could never see the Rebbe any other place. So I was one Shabbos walking to 770, and I noticed the Rebbetzin Chana standing by the door of her apartment building. Now on Shabbos, she never went out in the sunshine, and she was standing not in the street where she always did. She was standing by the door of her house, and I got very worried because she usually doesn't do that. So I went over and I said, Rebbetzin, good Shabbos, do you need anything? So she tells me the following, that this Shabbos is the Shabbos before the wedding of somebody that's very close to her. We call it the Ufruf, when the Chassan is called to the Torah before his wedding. The Kala has a Shabbos Kala, and that Shabbos is called the Shabbos Ufruf. In many shuls, people come, the family comes to wish Mazel Tov, and they make a Kiddush. And in places where women have a place to make a Kiddush, the women are at the Kiddush too. But in 770, there was no women's section. So the Rebbetzin said, I so much want to wish the parents of the Chassan Kala Mazel Tov, but there's no way for me to come to 770. So I want to go to their store because the Chassan's mother owned the fruit store that today is on Presidents and Kingston called Raskin's Fruit Store. The mother of the Chassan owned the fruit store. So the Rebbetzin wanted to go to the fruit store to wish Mazel Tov to the owner of the store. Now, here I am. I'm 14 and a half years old. I don't understand what she's going to do on Shabbos to a closed store. But that's what the Rebbetzin wanted. And then the Kala belonged to a family called Lipsker, that they owned a grocery store on the corner of Union Street that today is called Khan Superet. Then so she said, I want to go to the fruit store and I want to give my blessings to the owner of the fruit store. And then I'll go to the grocery store and give my blessings to the owner of the grocery store. I remember thinking this is so unreal, so surreal, but the Rebbetzin wants it. So I put my arm under hers. I walked her across the street and she stood in front of the closed fruit store and she closed her eyes and she was davening for about 5 minutes silently. And I was witnessing something so surreal. And then she said, and now let us go to the grocery. We went to the grocery, and of course the store is closed, it's Shabbos, and she did the same thing. She closed her eyes and very quietly was giving all her brachas to the owners of the grocery store in honor of the wedding of their daughter. And then she said, and now please walk me home. I walked her home, And instead of going to 770 to see the Rebbe, which I originally planned to do, I ran home because I needed my mother to tell me, what did I just witness? I witnessed something so surreal. My mother should explain it to me. And my mother, so off the bat, said, don't you understand? The Rebbetzin has so much Ahavas Yisrael. She wanted to wish the parents. So there's a way to wish in a Ruchniistic way, and there's a way to wish in a Gashmiistic way. She couldn't go there personally, so she went to this store, which is owned by the parents, and gave over in a spiritual way. She gave over her blessing. I remember that I didn't tell the story to anybody for years. I thought nobody's going to believe me. But many years later, I started teaching in high school, and I just blurted out this story. And suddenly 3 girls come running over because they're grandchildren of this fat couple. And they said, we never heard the story. I said, I never shared the story because I don't know who could believe it, but it just came out. So now I'm sharing the story because I told it so many times. The next story I want to tell you about her love for people is so interesting for many reasons. First of all, as I said, the Rebbetzin was like a grandmother to everybody, or maybe a mother to everybody. It didn't matter if you were Lubavitch or you were not. It didn't matter. If you were a woman who spoke to her, she would give her entire love to you and speak to you and give you advice if you wanted. It just made you feel good. There was a young girl that her family lived in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, where my mother's father had a shul. And I knew this family very well because I went to that shul quite often on Shabbos to my grandparents. And the girl was getting married, and she took an apartment in Rebbetzin Chana's building. For some reason, she liked Crown Heights. She had nothing to do with Lubavitch, but she liked the apartment. And when she went to set up her apartment, she noticed Rebbetzin Chana in the street. So she noticed it every time, and she was told she's the mother of the Rebbe. So one day, she gives the Rebbe an invitation to her wedding. And she said, will you please come to my wedding? So Rebbetzin Chana said, oh, I'll come to your wedding. And she was so excited. She gave me the invitation, and the Rebbetzin said she'll come. This girl went and told everybody, the Rebbe's mother is coming to my wedding. When my mother heard this, my mother was horrified because it was in the winter. The wedding was going to take place in Manhattan. How in the world is the Rebbetzin going to get to the wedding in Manhattan in the winter at night? The Rebbetzin didn't have a driver. She didn't have a grandchild to drive her. She didn't have a nephew. Who was going to get her there? How was she going to get there? So my mother realized that this Kala didn't realize that the Rebbetzin doesn't have anyone to take her. Today we could order Uber. Today we could order a car service. But all the way back in the night, this must have been 1960, there was no way of ordering a car service. That concept didn't yet exist. You had to go onto a main street and hail a cab and say, taxi, taxi, and hopefully you'll get a taxi. So my mother was wondering, how is the Rebbetzin going to get there? So she decided to call up the mother of the Kala and tell her that you must have made a very big mistake because the Rebbetzin has no way to get to the wedding. I suggest you call her up and tell her, Rebbetzin, it's much too difficult for you to go. Could you please allow the Chassan Kala to come to your house for a blessing? And you give them a blessing and you don't have to come to the wedding. So my mother calls to the mother of the Kala, and they told her she's at the apartment in Crown Heights, setting up the apartment. And they have a phone. You can call her there. So my mother called her, and she explained to the mother, and the mother said, oh, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I feel terrible that the Rebbetzin should be so put in a position that she doesn't have how to get there, and it's winter, and it's cold. Okay, tomorrow morning I'm going to call her and I'm going to ask for the children to go for a bracha, for a blessing, and she should not have to come to the wedding. And she thanked my mother for bringing this to her attention. My mother hung up the phone, and the phone rings 1 minute later. I was in the kitchen with my mother, and Rebbetzin Chana is on the phone. My mother couldn't imagine what she wants from her. So the Rebbetzin says, tell me, why does it bother you that I want to go to the wedding of this girl called Debitzer? My mother had no clue how the Rebbetzin knew so quickly because she just hung up the phone from the other lady. So my mother said, who said that I care if you go to the wedding? Why do you think that I have something against you going? Because she had no clue that the Rebbetzin knew. So the Rebbetzin says, let me tell you, I picked up the phone to make a phone call. And there happened to have been a cross wire. Now, girls, today it doesn't happen, but years ago in the same building, sometimes the wires got crossed, and you would pick up the phone and you would hear a neighbor on the phone talking. So what happened was that Rebbetzin Chana told my mother, she picked up the phone to make a phone call. She heard my mother saying to this mother of the collar that it's so hard for the Rebbetzin to go. I heard your whole conversation, but I want to tell you I want to go to the wedding because it's a very big mitzvah to make a collar happy. So I don't want you to mix in. I am going to go to the wedding. So my mother said, Rebbetzin, I'm sorry, I'm not mixing in, and you can do whatever you want. And my mother figured, oh, I'm in such trouble. So my mother decided that tomorrow morning she was going to call this lady when she's at home in Manhattan, and she's going to tell her that the Rebbetzin heard the whole conversation. So the whole plan is not working. So the Rebbetzin wants to come to the wedding. So you just have to arrange a car to bring her and take her back because she is not taking no for an answer. She said it's a mitzvah to be misameach the kala. So the Rebbetzin went in the winter at night all the way to Manhattan just to make a collar that she really had no connection to, but just a girl who asked her to come to a wedding, and she knew that she's going to make her happy, and it's such a big mitzvah to make a collar happy that the Rebbetzin went to her wedding. I want to share another story that's very personal. When I got engaged, we got engaged in Eretz Yisrael in Israel because my husband lived there and he couldn't go out because the government regulations with the army were very difficult. So the Rebbe said that I should go to meet him in Israel to see if the shidduch is suitable. And we got engaged there. And then he had to wait for quite a while until he could get out of Israel a legal way. The Rebbe wanted him to go through the whole channels of legalities with the government. And he got some legal loophole that if he goes to the army just for 1 month, he'll be free from the army and he could go to America without being considered a deserter. There were many people that left Israel as deserters, and the Rebbe didn't like that at all. So there was a very long time that we were engaged. We didn't know when the wedding could be because we didn't know when he'll go to the army. He finally came to New York, and my father said to me, why don't you go with him to Rebbetzin Chana and introduce the chassan? She knows you so well. She'll be so happy to meet your chassan, to meet your groom. I said, okay, we'll go. I was very close to the Rebbetzin, so I called her up and I said, I want to come and introduce my chassan to you. He, of course, was very shy because he didn't know the Rebbetzin, and any bacher would feel very shy. So I did the talking. And my husband does not come from Lubavitcher home. He became a Lubavitcher because when they came from Russia, and after all their trials and tribulations from leaving Russia, through all their traveling through Europe, through Germany, till they came to Eretz Yisrael, they came to a city called Lud, and there was a Lubavitcher cheder. So he and his brothers went to Lubavitcher cheder, and he became a Lubavitcher, and his brothers are Hasidim of another Rebbe. They are not Lubavitcher Hasidim, but my husband is. When we came to the Rebbetzin, she looked at him and she asked his name. And I said, but Rebbetzin, you're not going to know who it is because he's not from a Lubavitcher home. So she says, where's he from? And she was talking to me because she realized he's very shy. And I said, well, his mother's side comes from Odessa in Russia. She said, Odessa? I lived in Odessa. What's the name of the family? So I said, well, his grandfather was the Rav of Odessa. His name was Rabbi Friedman. So right away, she said the name Rachel Razel, because the wife of Rabbi Friedman, who was my husband's grandmother, was called Rachel Razel. And suddenly she gets red in the face. She says, Rachel Razel? Is that the grandmother? I said, yes, Rebbetzin. She got so red, I was afraid she's going to clearly have a stroke. She was so hysterical. She's alive? She's alive? She lived through the wars? She was my best friend. We used to spend our summers together. I'm so happy to hear that Rachel Razel is alive, and I didn't know what to do to calm her down. I said, as a matter of fact, she's still in Russia, and she's about to come to Eretz Yisrael in 6 more months. She was so excited to hear that her young childhood, very close friend is alive, and her grandson is getting married to me. Anyway, it seems that the Rebbetzin felt that my husband is sort of her priority. She has to worry about him. I didn't know this. We didn't know it. But it seems that every day when the young men, when they finish going to Kollel in the morning, they went home for lunch, they would always pass by where the Rebbetzin was standing. They didn't stop to talk to her because most of them didn't know her, but the Rebbetzin looked at them, and she remembered my husband, what he looked like, and she used to watch him. And one day she called up my mother and she said, I have to tell you that I was so worried about your son-in-law that he might feel very lonely in America and he doesn't have friends and it's going to be hard for him to acclimate. But I notice every day when he walks home, he's always talking with a friend. He's always smiling. I'm so happy to see that he is so well acclimated. We were so touched by that she cared so much about a young man who, Baruch Hashem, had a very happy life here, and he had a lot of friends, but she was afraid perhaps he's going to feel lonely. So those are the personal stories I have with Rebbetzin Chana. And I told you that I picked her up and I brought her to shul. It happens to be that very last year, the first day of Rosh Hashanah, she went to shul and she seemed to be fine. On the second day of Rosh Hashanah, when I came to knock on her door, she looked through the peephole, she saw it was me, and she said, Esther, I'm not feeling well today. I do not want to go to shul. You go on your own to daven. I said, Rebbetzin, let me stay with you. I don't want to leave you alone. She says, don't worry. I have a companion with me, and she's staying with me. You go to shul and daven. I never knew that this is going to be the last time that I'm conversing with the Rebbetzin, because 4 days later, on Shabbos of Vov Tishrei, just at mincha time, her holy neshama left her. Now, I have to tell you that it was very hard for us to even look at the Rebbe or think about the Rebbe suffering such a terrible loss. He loved his mother so dearly, and he was separated from her for so many years. When after he left her originally and he got married, she couldn't come to his wedding. And we realized that the loss is so great to him that we couldn't even fathom how the Rebbe must be feeling. But then the Rebbe said a sicha, very interestingly, and he spoke about a neshama that when it goes up on high, they're in a wonderful place. It's wonderful. They're in Gan Eden in a wonderful place. But there's one thing that the neshama suffers from. The neshama cannot do any mitzvahs in Shamayim. You can only do mitzvahs on this earth. And the neshama misses doing mitzvahs. And the neshama actually would like to come back down to earth to do mitzvahs, but the neshama cannot come back down again. So the Rebbe said, what can we do to ease the pain of the neshama? We can do mitzvahs in memory of that person, in honor of that person, neshama. And the neshama will feel that we're doing the mitzvahs for her, and the neshama will have the happiness. So the Rebbe explained to us that her name Chana, and I'm sure you've heard this today, so I'm not going to repeat it, that the name Chana is an acronym for the 3 mitzvahs that are entrusted to the women. The Ches standing for challah, which is about taking challah when we bake bread. And of course, it encompasses all the mitzvahs surrounding the food that we eat, that it should be kosher, it should be prepared in a kosher way, and it should be served in a kosher way. The Nun stands for Nida, which has to do with all the laws of family purity and all the laws of tznius, that the women are entrusted with that. And the Hay stands for Hadlakas Haner, which means lighting of the Shabbos candles. So the Rebbe told us that we should see that we should increase in our own observance of these mitzvahs, and we should try to get other people to keep these mitzvahs in her memory, in her honor, because this will bring her a lot of happiness. Now, you all know today that we have a mitzvah called Neshek, Shabbos candles. We have a mitzvah of kashrus. We have a mitzvah of Taras Mishpacha. But the Rebbetzin passed away in 1964, and the Miftzayim only started in 1974. So we weren't able to do the Miftzayim in the traditional way. We had to find our own way of how to influence people to do these mitzvahs, because the Rebbe said this is what's going to bring her a happiness. This will bring the neshama a satisfaction. But the Rebbe told us that that is what we have to do for her. So I want to tell you, because I'm in charge of Mitzvah Neshek, I want to tell you just 2 stories because the time is late and I could go on a whole night, which is not my prerogative to do. I want to tell you, because a lot of you girls, I know you go on a mitzvah now with COVID, a little bit it's more difficult. I hope that's going to be over very soon. And you know that we go out with the candle lighting brochures and we talk to people about lighting Shabbos candles. And sometimes you walk away and you're very upset because the person says they're not interested, or they said, leave me alone, or they just tell you that flat out they're not going to do it. And you walk away feeling very upset. But I want to tell you that you can never know what could happen that a person could change their mind. If you give them brochure and they hold on to it, maybe not this week, and maybe not next week, and maybe not until next year, but maybe one day that person is going to take a look and change her mind. I want to tell you something very interesting that happened during COVID. I was out of town. I left Brooklyn because of the danger. I went to a place where it was very quiet, but I kept calling my phone number to find out any messages. And there was a message from a lady that I didn't know who she was. I called her back, and she tells me that 28 years ago, we had put an ad in the New York Times about lighting Shabbos candles for the whole month of Tishrei. And she said, my husband cut out this ad, and I hold on to it all these years. And this teaches me how to say the blessings for Rosh Hashanah and before Yom Kippur. It never dawned on her to call me up for a brochure or to write and ask for a new brochure. But she held on to this piece of paper from the New York Times, and this guided her in lighting candles for 28 years. It just dawned on her that because it's tearing already, maybe I can send her something else. So 28 years later, I find out that this woman started lighting candles because of that ad of the newspaper. 2 days ago, I got a letter that I must read to you because I still can't calm down. I get a lot of mail this time of the year because we have a big mailing list that we send brochures to, and a lot of people send us a letter. Could you please send me 2 more for my neighbors or for my daughter-in-law, for the relative or whatever? And I'm used to getting all kinds of letters. And sometimes people write a nice little story, how they thank for it, and it keeps them connected to Yiddishkeit, to the Jewish tradition, and sometimes I get interesting letters. This letter blew me away. The letter reads as follows. Good morning. Thank you, Lubavitcher ladies, for your continuing commitment of providing a guide to lighting Shabbat candles. The brochure is called A Guide to Lighting Shabbat Candles, not only in America, but throughout the world. Over 35 years ago, you mailed my preschool-aged daughter, Miriam, her very own candle holder, which became part of her Friday evening wherever life experience beckoned. Although she and her husband received candle holders for their wedding 10 years ago, Miriam prefers using the gift from Lubavitcher ladies. Baruch Hashem, perhaps a daughter of theirs will continue this beautiful gift that was given to a Shabbos candle that was given to a little girl many years ago. And she went on to thank us and bless us. I had to call her up because I had to hear the story firsthand. And she lived somewhere in Maine, in a city I never heard of. I couldn't get her number, and I had to try very hard on the internet through the telephone directory, and she didn't answer the phone, and it bothered me that I can't reach her. But finally, yesterday morning at 8:30 in the morning, I reached her, and I said, is this Andrea? And I was so excited I reached her, and I said, I got a letter from you, and it's so interesting to me that you're writing about your daughter who received a candlestick 35 years ago. And she went on to say how her daughter would always light candles because she was so excited about her candlesticks. Even though they were always traveling, she always took it with her. And then she went on to say that even now, even though she's married, has her other candlesticks, she likes to use these. You know, she says, they're made so sturdy. I can't get over how sturdy they are. Now, she's talking about this candle holder that we've been manufacturing for 46 years. And this is a candle holder that the Rebbe himself designed, because the Rebbe originally saw the candle holder that was made for us by a manufacturer, but the Rebbe felt was not stable enough. And the Rebbe told us not to use it because the base was very narrow and it was too tall and it would tip over easily. So the manufacturer went and designed 5 different styles because they didn't know what to do and sent it into the Rebbe. The Rebbe should choose one of the 5. The Rebbe did not approve any of the 5, but he took the cap from one. He pointed to his secretary. This should be the cap. This circular should be the middle. And this base that's 4.5 inches in circumference should be the wide base. That should be the candle holder. So according to the Rebbe's instructions, we are producing the same candle holder for 35 years. For 46 years, I'm sorry. So I told this lady that the story that the Rebbe is the one who designed it, because she said it's so sturdy. So I figured, let me tell her the reason why it's so sturdy, because the Rebbe designed it in such a way. When she heard that, she started to cry. She said, what? The Lubavitcher Rebbe, a man that had the whole world on his shoulders, spent time to design a candle holder for a little girl with so many people all over the world that he had to worry about? This is what he spent his time to see, that a little girl should have a safe candle holder? And she was crying of emotion. It was unbelievable. At the end of a conversation, she told me that she has a lot of friends that have grandchildren, and she's going to send me a list of where to send candle holders to the grandchildren of her friends, that they should also have this wonderful experience. I'm going to share one other story with you. I know the time is limited. There are two more speakers. I want to just tell you that last year was 75 years since the passing of the Rebbe's father, Reb Levi Yitzchak. He passed away in Kazakhstan, and you probably heard the story that he was exiled. He was put into prison because he was a rabbi, and the communist government didn't approve of it. And after his prison sentence of a short time, of a few months, they decided they're going to send him to exile to a very godforsaken place, very barren, in a tropical, very bad climate, very far away from normal people, from civilization. And they sent him to a city called Chile, not Chile, South America, but Chile in Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is so far away, it borders on China. That's how far away it is. Last year, for the 75th Yahrtzeit, many people decided they want to go to his grave to honor him on the 75th anniversary of his passing. And hundreds of people from all over the world were going to come, and they were going to have 2 days of learning and lectures and banquets and celebrations and farbrengens about his life and everything that he gave us. I had a special birthday last year before the summer, so our children decided we had to go to Eretz Yisrael for a wedding. They gifted us with tickets to go to Kazakhstan for these few days of celebration there. And we were going from Israel to Kazakhstan through Kiev, through Ukraine. We get on the plane in Israel, and something happens, and we're not taking off. And I'm getting very nervous because I knew that there's a 2-hour stretch until we get to the next plane in Kiev. We have to change for a plane to Kazakhstan. And the plane was now taking off from Israel, and I was getting very nervous. And true to be, we missed our flight. We came at 9 o'clock at night. 8-hour difference. We came, it was 9 o'clock at night. All the counters were closed. The Russian people there didn't want to help us. They said, sorry, you missed the plane. 24 hours from now, we have another flight to Kazakhstan. And as much as we tried, there was a gentleman there that helped us who spoke Russian. And we told them that we have something to be for, a very important religious. They didn't care. They didn't want to help us. My husband said he's going to see what to do. They're going to call New York, the travel agent. Maybe there's another way. Go sit down. You relax, because my blood pressure was going sky high because I didn't want to be in Kiev. I wanted to be in Kazakhstan. As I'm sitting on the couch, my cell phone, my American cell phone, was ringing. And I probably shouldn't have answered the call because it probably cost a lot of money. But somehow I had a feeling somebody's calling me. Maybe it's important. And I pick up the phone. And my friend from Crown Heights, her name is Sarah Lieberman, calls me up and she says, hi, Esther, how are you? This is Sarah Lieberman. I said, Sarah, you're calling me at such a terrible time. It's 9 o'clock at night. I'm stuck in Ukraine. I'm supposed to travel on to Kazakhstan, and I lost my flight, and I'm not going to be there. And you caught me at such a bad time, and you're so cheerful. She said, because I have a very beautiful story to tell you. I said, you know what? I have nothing to do. I'm waiting to see if they can arrange something. Tell me the beautiful story. So she tells me that her son has a Chabad house in Long Island, and one of the members of the shul, his mother passed away, and they were sitting Shiva. And he went to pay a Shiva call to this young man that he knows from his congregation. And the people, there were a lot of people. There were 2 rooms there full of men and women, a lot of people. And there was a sister of this young man that was sitting Shiva in the ladies section. And suddenly she says something, and everybody got quiet. She said, I want you all to know that we are all religious today because of one candle. And the room got so quiet because it doesn't make sense. What has a candle got to do with the whole family becoming religious? And everybody got quiet to hear what she said. And she went on to say that she was a very young girl and she was walking in the street with her mother to have her ears pierced. And somebody approached her and wanted to speak to her mother about lighting Shabbos candles. And her mother said, I'm sorry, I'm busy, we have an appointment. And she took the packet that they gave her, but she went on her way and never spoke to the person who gave it to her. Now, as soon as I heard the story, I knew exactly what they're talking about because I remember exactly, although it was 45 years prior to her telling me the story, that I remember receiving a phone call on a Friday afternoon from a lady called Claire. Her name was Claire Blitzstein. She became a very good friend of mine. And she called up and said, who are you people that gave me this candle holder and this candle? And I said, well, we're Lubavitch Women's Organization. She said, are you the same people that check the mezuzahs? Because sometimes they come to my house to check mezuzahs. I said, yes, we're a sister organization. She said, well, why do you care that I should light candles? So I went on to say, well, it's a very special tradition that Jewish women do, and it brings peace to the home. It brings tranquility. It brings a lot of blessings. And it's a very beautiful thing to do. It's a tradition going on for thousands of years. She says, yes, I know my grandmother used to light candles, but I never did, and my mother never did. But you know what? I think it's a beautiful thing, so maybe I'll do it. I said, well, do you have any more candles at home? Because you only have one for your daughter that you got in the packet. She says, I happen to have candles when I have a dinner party. They're not white, they're not Shabbos candles, but I could use those. And she had the brochure that was going to tell her the bracha. The rest of the story was that I said to her something about her children, that she should see that her daughter should light. And then she says, yes, I'm really worried about my children because school's going to be over in 2 weeks and my children have nothing to do in the summer. We live in a very bad neighborhood and they're going to have a very bad influence. And I'm very worried about them. I said, well, would you think of sending your children to camp? She said, well, I would love to, but I don't have any money and I don't know where to send them. I said, well, how old are your children? And she told me that her son is turning 13 August 15th. She didn't say he's turning bar mitzvah. She said he's turning 13. So I thought to myself, this woman is not even doing anything to help a child have a bar mitzvah because she didn't mention bar mitzvah. So I said, let me see what I could do. And I hang up the phone and I call up the director of the boys' camp. And I said, I have a proposition for you. I have a boy that's turning bar mitzvah in the summer and he has no preparation. You can make this a campaign that the whole camp is going to work on helping this boy become a bar mitzvah. And then you'll make a very big celebration and all the children will feel they're part of this boy's family because they all work to help him to learn for the bar mitzvah. The director of the camp right away said yes. And this boy was right away accepted to the overnight camp for the whole summer. Then I arranged for the girl and the younger girl, the younger boy. The girl's called Rachel. And they went to a day camp. And I was talking to Claire every once in a while. She would call up. She started to light candles every Friday evening. And she started to think about kosher. And she had a lot of questions. And at the end of the summer, she called me up and she said, Esther, I don't know what to do. My children don't want to go to public school anymore. They said they had such a wonderful time in a Jewish camp and they learned so much. They don't want to go to public school. So I said, well, we're just going to have to find yeshivas for them. And we found yeshivas and we put the boys in yeshiva. We put Rachel in yeshiva. Rachel became Rachel. Today she's married. She wears a sheitel. She's very frum. Her daughter is even married and wears a sheitel. And when I came back from Kazakhstan, by the way, we got another flight and we did make it to Kazakhstan, just in case you were worried, we did make it. When I came back to New York, I quickly called up to Sarah Lieberman and I said, could you get me the number to this young man, Mr. Blitzstein? I want to speak to his sister because I remember Rachel very well. And he gave me the number. And when I called her and I said, my name is Esther Sternberg, she said, Esther Sternberg, you're a household name. We talk about you always because of you, because of your candle. It wasn't me. It was the Rebbe. But because of the candle, we're all very frum today. And we're only frum because somebody stopped us to give us that candle. I speak to her from time to time. She's a very lovely person. Interestingly enough, she told me that the day they got up from Shiva, her daughter, means Claire granddaughter, gave birth to a baby, and Claire got a name right away, right after the Shiva, which is a very special thing to get a name right away. When I think about the story, I think that the person who gave out this candlestick doesn't know what she accomplished. She probably thought at the time it's a waste of time. This lady just took the package, wasn't interested, and it was a waste of all my effort. But she doesn't know that all the mother and the father and the three children all became very religious, and their children are religious, and there's a continuation from this one candle. I'm telling you the story because I want to urge you that the Rebbe wanted us to do Mifta Neshek. The Rebbe wanted us to do Mifta so that we could light the neshama of a person who, for whatever reason, the neshama was not yet lit up to do mitzvahs. And I want to tell you that sometimes it looks like perhaps you're not successful, perhaps a person not interested, but you can never know what an effect it could have on them in the future. So just continue doing it because I'm sure that it's going to have a wonderful effect. And if you do it for Ilan Nishmas Rebbetzin, the memory of the Rebbetzin, you are making her neshama have a lot of happiness that mitzvahs are being done in her honor. I wish you all a Gemar Chasima Tova. I wish you Hatzlacha Rabbah in everything. I wish everybody Kol Tov, and Hashem should bless us that Mashiach should come very, very speedily, even before this Yom Kippur, and we'll be united with the Rebbe and with his mother and our Rebbe Tzvachaya Mushka and all our loved ones. A good Gebed Shiur, everybody.
Thank you so much, Mrs.